Hi everyone, I am Miss M, and here I have a couple tips for you for when passing your paper 1 and paper 2 for research methods for this psychology. All right, so normally we have to memorize and understand the strengths and the weaknesses of our vocab terms. I'm here to tell you that there's only 4 that you have to memorize in order to understand a majority of the research terms. Okay, so there are specifically 4 terms that have counterparts to them that are complete opposites in the strengths and the weaknesses. So technically, you only have to study 4 and you'll know 8 of them. And you can use this to your advantage on the exam, okay? So let's start with lab experiments and field experiments, okay? Lab and field experiments. So the strengths of a lab experiment are going to be the weaknesses of a field experiment, and the strengths of a field experiment are going to be the weaknesses of a lab experiment. Here is an example. So in a lab experiment, you can manipulate the independent variable and implement controls, but a weakness of a field experiment is that you can't implement any controls, okay? And it's really hard to have different conditions of the independent variable. Now, there is high ecological validity in a field study. That is a strength of a field study, but that is a weakness of a lab experiment. Okay, so you can see if you can memorize the strengths and the weaknesses of one, then you automatically can flip them and know the strengths and the weaknesses of their counterpart and their other. Okay, let's look at qualitative and quantitative data. Okay, the strengths of qualitative data are the weaknesses of quantitative data and vice versa. So qualitative data, the data can be in-depth, rich in detail. That is actually a weakness of qualitative data. It's very reductionistic and you have no idea why anyone did what they did. Okay, so you're going to want to study these strengths and these weaknesses. Let's do another. The data can help us to understand why people behave in a particular way. Using quantitative data is reductionistic and it reduces behavior to a single yes or no. So while we have a plethora of reasons why people behave the way they do, we don't have that here. But for quantitative data, using numbers and statistics allow us to make generalizations about the conditions. In qualitative data, you cannot make statistical comparisons, okay? So the strengths of qualitative data are going to be the weaknesses of quantitative and vice versa. You understand that? Okay. Now, here's another, longitudinal versus snapshot study, okay? So a snapshot is quick instances of data and longitudinal is data taken over long periods of time. Okay, so let's see. There is participants in a longitudinal study might fall out because of, it's called attrition from a long periods of time. We don't have time to be in a study for 10 years. Things might come up, we might move. That is a positive in the snapshot study, is that we don't have, people can take instances of data at one particular time. There's less likely for people to drop out of our study, okay? And also, you know, while we are looking at behavior over long periods of time, which is a strength, we cannot look at data and behavior over long periods of time, which is a weakness of a snapshot study, okay? One more for you. Repeated measures and independent groups, okay? Now, a strength to repeated measure design is that you need very little amount of participants, okay? Now, in independent measure design, you need a lot of participants. It's the exact opposite, okay? Like I said, participants only perform one condition of the independent variable, so there's likely to have no order effect. Participants perform multiple conditions of the independent variable, so there are likely to be order effect, which is a disadvantage, all right? So at the end of the day, guys, you're going to want to study the strengths and the weaknesses of lab experiment, quantitative data, longitudinal study, and independent groups. If you know the strengths and the weaknesses of those, then you're going to know the strengths and weaknesses of field experiment, qualitative data, snapshot study, and repeated measures. Okay? Get studying.